It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Rich Scanlon, CEO of Workspace, his third CEO assignment. Most recently, Rich was CEO of ImageQuix and PhotoLynx, both ASG companies a part of Alpine Investors. Prior to that, he was Director of Business Development at Medallia, a leading customer experience management SaaS company. Early in his career, Rich was CEO of RPM Worldwide, one of the largest private concert marketing and promotion companies on the East Coast. He started his business career as a management consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. Rich received his MBA from the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania, and prior to receiving his MBA, Rich played 5 years in the National Football League as a linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs, Tennessee Titans, and New York Giants. Rich completed his undergraduate studies at Syracuse University, where he graduated Magna Cum Laude and was captain of the football team. Rich Scanlon, welcome into the corner office.
Hey, Brant, thanks for having me.
Good to have you here today, and thank you for your patience. We had a couple of technical glitches a couple of weeks ago, but I think we got them ironed out today, and so looking forward to this conversation. And we usually start at the beginning, and that's understanding a little bit about you and kind of where you grew up, your early family life. Tell us a little bit about that. Where'd you grow up? What mom and dad do? Brothers and sisters? That kind of thing.
Yep, I grew up, so I'm an East Coaster. Uh,
Mm,
grew up in the New York area. My mother's from the Bronx, New York, and my father's from upstate New York and Buffalo area.
right.
Um, you know, a son of, Irish and Italian immigrants, much like most people in that area.
Typical union.
Yes, yeah, typical New York, New Jersey, kind of background. Yeah, like I said, grew up outside the city, for most of my life.
Right.
Um, families kind of all over the place. I got a brother and a sister, both younger, settled in New Jersey.
Okay.
Family retired to the Jersey Shore. So very, very typical, kind of, roots in the Northeast. I actually relocated to Raleigh. So,
Yeah.
my mother disowned me for about 6 months when I moved away.
Then she came down and visited and liked it.
Yeah, yeah, that Italian guilt.
What were mom and dad's careers?
So my mom was a teacher.
Okay.
She did various kinds of like teaching jobs, and my father was actually she retired working for the state government helping elderly people.
Ah,
So
cool.
she taught early on in her career, then kind of worked for the state of New York, helping elderly folks, find jobs and get social services. Father was an executive on the operations side in the cosmetic and beauty industry. Worked for
Ah,
Charles
cool.
the Ritz, Revlon.
Yeah.
Um, very anti. I mean, he's very much blue collar guy, but he found himself wearing a suit and tie every day, and
Wow.
was pretty good at it. So he did a lot of supply chain stuff in the beauty industry. Retired a few years ago. Both parents retired. Living the dream at the beach right now.
Love it. Awesome. And what about your school days? Pretty good student in school, or loved the things you loved and didn't like other stuff?
I would say I enjoyed school, which was
Yeah.
probably different than most kids, I guess. But I enjoyed school. Was lucky enough to be able to go to a really good private high school in New Jersey.
Yeah.
A lot of that had to do with athletics as well. But yeah, always enjoyed school. I was a physiology major in undergrad, so really had nothing to do with business.
Right.
I thought I was going to go into the medical profession, but my early career, steered me in another direction. But always enjoyed school. Didn't think I would go back to get a master's degree, but as life has it, that's what I ended up doing.
Right.
So
Right.
always was a fan of going to school, going to class, and it's learning has always been fun to me.
Furthering your education. Yeah. What about entrepreneurial activities? Anything you did as a kid that you've tapped into now in your serial entrepreneurship, which we'll talk about in a minute?
Well, I guess like nothing in my early childhood. I think sports has a lot to do with
Yeah.
kind of risk taking and entrepreneurial spirit. When you're a football player, at least professionally, you're an independent contractor. I get
Right.
people don't realize that like
Yeah.
contracts are structured as like you're basically,
You're your own company. Yeah.
1099 kind of employee, and
Right.
you're an independent
Right.
contractor, and you
Yeah.
get hired, fired, at the drop of a hat. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Hard Knocks, but that taught me a lot about resiliency and just kind of
Right.
like just try and get up and fall down. And failure never bothered me, and risk taking never bothered me in the business world. And I think a lot of that has to do with kind of the harsh reality of playing sports. It's very binary.
Any jobs in junior high school that were formative for you?
I worked at a physical therapy clinic from
Ah,
when
cool.
I was 15. My mom had to take me to like the state labor board to get like a work permit since I was
Wow.
under 16.
Yeah.
So I was working since a very young age, and I worked at a physical therapy clinic, and that's pretty much what I did through high school. Um, and then playing sports in college, I worked at like an office building. I think I delivered papers. So did a whole bunch of odds and end jobs, between high school and college. But
Yeah.
physical therapy clinic is where I cut my teeth in the working world.
Well, we want to get into your early career as a professional football player in a minute, but tell us a little bit about how that began for you. Were you did you do Pop Warner? Did you get involved in football as a kid? When did that become an interest?
Second grade, first
Second
time
grade.
I put on
Cool.
the helmet. I think
Wow.
that probably seems crazy in today's world, but in
Yeah.
second grade I put on the helmet. I think that was in 1988.
7, 8 years old? How old are you
Yeah,
then? Must have been,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It
7 years
was
old.
around, yeah, probably 8 years old.
Yeah.
Actually seven,
Right.
1988
Right.
fall. Yeah, I was 7 years old. So, and then I turned in my last helmet in February of 2009. So I think that's like
That's
21 or 22 years.
That's a lot of years. Did mom and dad kind of lead you down that road? Did you have friends? What was kind of the impetus to put that helmet on at the ripe age of 7?
So the urban legend is that my parents put down like three or four different like sports balls when I was like 2 years old, and I
Right,
always gravitated towards the football.
right,
Ever
right.
since I was a little kid, I just gravitated towards that. And my father said when he would watch like football on Saturdays and Sundays, I was like 3 years old. He's like, I just put you in front of the TV and you wouldn't move for
Wouldn't
like
move.
3
Isn't that
hours.
interesting? All of the other balls are shaped round. I wonder if it had something to do with the shape of the ball and your curiosity. What do you think?
I don't know. I would like to think something like that, but I think I just enjoyed the hitting part of it. If I
Right,
wanted to be
right.
honest about my primal instincts, it was probably more of that than the shape of and wearing the helmet. I think I really liked wearing like the equipment.
Yeah,
It was always a
yeah.
thing for me when I was younger.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
That's cool.
it got me from a very young age.
So at 7, what was it Pop Warner, the equivalent?
Yeah,
What
it was
did you?
Pop Warner,
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
was a thing back then.
right,
It was Pop Warner, and then obviously high school.
right.
Lucky enough to play in college
Yeah.
at a good school, and then yeah, and my theory with football was like I'm gonna keep going until they tell me to stop. I didn't have any aspirations of or goals of trying to make it to the next level. I always wanted to get a scholarship to college because my parents told me, you know, then they could afford a car maybe for me if I got to
There you go.
college and a
There you go.
scholarship. So yeah, never really kind of sat down and said, playing professional is my goal. I just wanted to keep playing till I couldn't anymore, and that's what ended up happening. So
So
very
so
fortunate.
so you played through high school. You said you went to a private high school. Did you compete against other boarding schools or private schools in the area? And
Yeah, we
was there a state
competed
championship?
against both public and
Yeah.
private. I went
Right.
to Bergen Catholic High School, if anyone's familiar with like the New York, New Jersey area.
Yeah.
Pretty well known school for football. Put out a couple professional guys. So yeah, we would play a mix of public and private schools. I mean, back then it wasn't so much you know, the factories they are now.
Right.
It was very much balanced. Like, we lost to a public school team, I think my second or third year there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, had a great great experience there, and I go back often and stay heavily involved.
Awesome. So Syracuse undergrad, were you recruited? Did you get a
Yes.
scholarship there? Yeah,
Yep.
awesome.
Full scholarship to Syracuse, and
Nice.
back then, believe it or not, they were very good at football. It pains me to say that, these days. But yeah, that was the era of Donovan McNabb and Dwight
Yeah,
Freeney, and BCS bowls, and Syracuse was a big deal, and
right.
hopefully they'll get back there one day. But yeah, full scholarship there. Was
Played
lucky.
all 4 years.
Yeah, 4-year letter winner. I redshirted my first year, so I was there about 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, parlayed that to I basically made the the Kansas City Chiefs as a walk on in
Wow.
relative terms because I was only 7 rounds in the draft, so I call
Yeah.
myself an eighth round draft pick.
Got it. Got
So
it. Love it.
so yeah, made the team, was on the practice squad for the first part of the year, and then got elevated to the main roster and my rookie year, and kind of didn't look back for the next few years.
Awesome. Awesome. So about 5 years it played. Started in Kansas City. Went to Tennessee for a minute, right? How long were you down there?
Yep, I had played in Tennessee for about a season,
Yep.
and then I had a cup of coffee in New York. That's the term we use when you're there for a couple weeks. Had a cup of coffee in New York with the Giants um, in the 2008 season, so finished off against in the playoffs in 2009. Did a short stint in NFL Europe. I played one season in NFL Europe in Berlin. That's where I met
Was
my
that was
wife.
that after the Giants?
No, that
Yeah,
was in
before.
between my first and second years playing.
Yeah.
So I was there in 2005. So in between my rookie year and my second year, I
Right.
went over there and played in the spring. The Chiefs, I mean, the Chiefs thought of the league as like a more of a developmental league where they sent younger
Right.
players. So,
Right.
so went over there and met my now wife of 14 years.
Ah, awesome.
So very fond of my time there. I love Berlin, and yeah, it's kind of came back and played a couple more years, and you know then I had to get a real job.
When did you know or think that it was time to hang up the helmet, so to speak?
So that's a great question, and I mean, I have a very clear in my mind. It was late January 2009. The NFL does a program at a bunch of the business schools where it's kind of like executive coaching, they
Yeah.
workshops, things like that. So they do it at like HBS, Wharton, Kellogg,
They
Stanford.
they send different national football
Yeah,
players to
yeah,
those
you
locations. Oh, that's
apply,
awesome.
and then
Yeah.
like about 30 guys get accepted, and like, you get to sit down with, you get to do seminars with the professors at the schools and things like that. So
Right.
I knew the writing was on the wall for my football career. I didn't want to be one of those guys who kind of bounced around to, city to city.
Yeah.
I had just gotten married, and kind of wanted to settle down a bit. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Decided to try out this NFL program. I got into the one at Wharton. Didn't think I'd like it. Told myself I was never going back to school. Ended up doing the 3-day seminar and loving it. Met
Yeah.
some really
Were you
great
at the, in the Saul Steinberg Center there? Did they have it?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I did my
Huntsman Hall.
executive education there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Beautiful
Huntsman
facility.
Hall. So got to meet a lot of great professors who were
Yeah.
super influential.
Yeah.
And the best piece of advice, I got two pieces of advice when I went there that was kind of profound in my career. One is NFL like experience will get you the first interview, it won't get you the second.
Hmm.
So that kind of hit me in the face.
Yep.
And then the second thing that someone told me is because I was thinking about going to business school, and one of the professors told me, just like, this might sound bad, but this is what she told me. She said, if you're going to go to business school, if you don't get into a top 10 school, you probably shouldn't go if you're looking to switch careers.
Yeah. It's true. No,
So
absolutely.
I was
As a
like,
recruiter, I can verify
yeah. It's like,
that. Good counsel.
so
Good
so
counsel.
leaving that, I thought, okay, I really have no job prospects because I have NFL on my resume.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get one interview, but not a job. And then if I can't get into one of these schools, I really got no shot to get a new career. So I better get my act together.
So it was really a pivot for you, right? I mean, it was an
It
opportunity to
was. It
restart
was.
your career. Yeah.
It
Awesome.
was. So
Awesome.
it was
Yeah.
very influential in my decision to
Yeah.
kind of, put the brakes on football for a little bit.
Was
Um,
it hard? Was that a hard call, Rich, at that stage?
it was and wasn't.
Yeah.
I tend to think I'm a pretty focused guy. So once I've kind of done something, I kind of go on to the next thing.
Right.
So it wasn't that hard. It was a necessity for me. So I
Yeah.
viewed it as more of like a survival thing than a choice. I kind
Right.
of didn't have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after that, got back, started studying for the GMAT, did my research on things. NFL helped me get an internship at Merrill Lynch just to kind of learn the business acumen because, like I mentioned before, like I was a physiology major.
Right,
I
right. Yeah,
studied
yeah.
like pre-med stuff,
Right,
science. I knew
right.
nothing about business.
Yeah.
So, funny enough, when I applied to business school, you have to submit a resume, and I
Right.
didn't know how to do that. So I'm in Barnes and Nobles looking
Looking
up.
at resume books.
They have these books like Computers for Dummies and things like that. Like I was looking
Sure.
for resume for dummies,
Right, right.
looking for examples of like athletes who wrote resumes. So, you know, I always tell people when they ask, because the stereotype is, athletes aren't, that intellectual. And what I would tell them, it's like, it's not that we're dumb, we just don't know.
Yeah, right.
Like,
It's a knowledge break,
yeah, it's
right?
a
Yeah,
knowledge thing, it's not an
yeah.
intelligence thing. So,
Right.
that put me on my journey, and I still worked out, maybe hoping to get a call, and I did for the Giants to go back for a couple weeks. But by that point, I was all in on going
Yeah,
back to school, and
yeah.
actually on my way to Penn to start my first day of school, I got a call from the Detroit Lions, and
Hmm.
this is kind of like one of my regrets. My only regret in life is that I didn't go back.
Didn't
So the
pursue it.
Lions asked me to go to
Yeah.
training camp. I'm on the bus to Penn, and I just said like that part of my life is over. I'm
You
done.
made a choice. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a small part of me that's like, man, what if
I wonder what would have happened.
I wonder what would have happened if I would have just told, Penn to wait a semester. What would
Right,
have happened?
right.
So there's a small part of me that thinks about that, but overall, it was the right life decision for me, and
Made the
kind of
commitment. No
yeah,
regrets. Yeah.
started the
Keep going
second part
for
of
it.
my career basically.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about that in a minute. But just looking back at those 5 years with the NFL, you made an interesting comment earlier on about being an independent contractor. And you had to learn to kind of be a businessman. You were your own brand. And if you had to kind of distill some of the lessons that you learned during those 4 or 5 years that's helped you towards your career, what would those be, Rich?
Understanding taxes.
Right, right. Very
Um,
key in
you
those
know,
first jobs.
as an independent contractor, they don't teach you. You learn very fast about all the different tax laws and things you have to do
Yeah.
with taxes, and
If you're not setting that money aside,
yeah,
at the end of the
exactly right.
year,
So a
that's
lot of
due.
financial management, I think, was
Mm,
missed because NFL players don't get paid year round; they get paid within a 17-week time frame.
right, right.
So you have to like cash manage,
We're like a
financially
teacher in that
plan.
regard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So learning cash management, financial strategies, tax strategies, all very, very important parts of like surviving as someone who gets paid in kind of an irregular way. And then also understanding business opportunities, learning how to evaluate, different business opportunities that come along. Obviously, you get proposed a lot of different things, and
Sure.
understanding kind of, you know, what to look for, what to avoid. Also understanding all of the different tools there are, out there as a young person, like in 22 years old,
Yeah,
23 years old,
right.
you get a lot of exposure to things in the financial markets you typically wouldn't, as someone just out of college. So really got a crash course on a lot of financial like kind of acumen that you
Did you
typically.
have mentors, or did the NFL provide any kind of guidance or advisory services in that
So
regard?
they try, and I
Yeah.
think they've done a much better job of like offering kind of services. But my attitude on that has been like, I'm an adult. You know,
Yeah. Right.
they're paying
Right.
you like an adult. You have a job. They're not doing that stuff to, if you're a first year, working as a, PR analyst or a
Right.
banking analyst or whatever, they're not
Right.
offering all this stuff to you. So
Sure.
I didn't lean too heavily on that. I lent
Figured it out. Yeah.
yeah, I led. I mean, I lent heavily on my agent, a financial advisor that I had at the time, my parents. I was lucky enough to have two
Right.
very, very supportive parents who were successful, so leaned on them a lot. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of, trial by fire and learning in those early years and getting exposure to things that not a lot of 22, 23, 24-year-old kids get exposure to,
Sure.
when it comes to, being a professional in the business world.
Yeah. Have you tapped on some of those learnings in successive jobs and your entrepreneurial career since then?
Yeah, I think um, not so much the quantitative, a lot of
Yeah.
qualitative things.
Right.
A big piece of advice that I got when I was playing, you'd worry about like who was getting playing time, who was getting the credit and not.
Mm,
And a big piece of advice that I got is control the things you can control.
right.
And I think
Right.
that's one of the biggest things I've taken with me, to the C-suite and running businesses is you cannot get worked up about what everybody else
Yeah.
around you is going to do,
Don't
because
worry
they're
about
going
that
to do
stuff.
it regardless of whether you get anxiety about it or not.
Right. Right. Right.
You can control your own products, you can control your own services, you can control who you hire, you can control how you spend your money. Like that stuff I can control.
Yeah.
I can't control what everybody else is doing, so I don't spend a lot of time thinking about
Don't
it.
worry about it. Yeah.
And that's been
Got it.
something that I've taken with me everywhere I've gone, and it's
Awesome.
served me really, really well, especially when it comes to executing like business strategy,
Right.
or go to market strategy, or any kind of strategy where you've made a decision on what you need to do without distraction.
Right.
And that's been kind of the biggest thing is worry about the things you can control, and everything else you just got to let it happen.
Yeah, cool. So a couple of years at Wharton, great school, and then a couple of internships, right? You did Merrill Lynch and then a BCG internship, from what I gather, and then
Yeah.
you got hired by BCG. So tell us about that choice as your first job coming out, first full time job coming out of college
So
or coming out of
BCG
MBA.
is a great extension of business school, I think, to someone like
Yeah,
me who's
yeah.
never had like a traditional business
Business
job.
training. Yeah, right.
One of the top consulting firms in the world, full of brilliant, nice people who want to help you learn. So BCG is a part of my career that I hold very, very fondly,
Yeah,
because people I met and the opportunity I got at a very young, inexperienced age, and in working with, very big businesses, very big problems. BCG was an awesome experience. I think for me, and I think every job I've had, I've learned a little bit about myself and what is important to me in my career. I think being at BCG, the biggest thing I kind of learned about myself and what I was looking for is I wanted to go faster.
hmm,
BCG is a very big place, works with very big clients. So the pace of play in terms of career progression is very, very kind of defined.
right,
And I
right.
think for someone like me, who I found myself being much more entrepreneurial in the fact that I wanted to take a little bit more risk in decision making in business. I wanted to have more say in kind of, not only like what was decided, but actually executing on decisions.
Hmm,
And I didn't have a ton of patience.
yeah,
And those are things that weren't necessarily great qualities. I learned to have them, as I got older, but like immediately out of school, I thought I knew more than I did, obviously. But BCG was a great place, and a place that I think of very, very fondly. I wouldn't be where I am today without them. But yeah, I found myself being gravitating to more smaller business type of things,
hmm,
like more of a hectic environment, a little bit more risk taking. So that's kind of how I've kind of made my decisions. It's like, okay, hey, how can I get to, you know, basically the way I just thought about it in terms of sports, I always equate everything to sports. It's like,
right.
if we win, it's going to be on my shoulders, and if we lose, it's going to be on me. So whether we win or lose, I want it to be on me. I want that responsibility. So I was always looking for things where that gave me an opportunity to do that.
Yeah. You use the word nice when you describe the BCG people. And I've interviewed a lot of folks from McKinsey and Booz Allen. Didn't hear that word a lot. So tell us a little bit about that. What was it about the people there that was different?
I just found them to be genuinely caring people
Hmm.
who were, and each consulting firm I think has their own kind of
Culture.
style. Yeah, culture, I guess, is the best way to put it. BCG, they're the nice, smart people. I would.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe BCG.
Yeah.
In terms of their culture, they're the very nice, very smart people. Um, Cared about their employees a lot. I don't know the other consulting firms, so it's no indictment on them. But I just knew the
Right.
BCG people, and they just are very nice and smart.
Yeah.
That's the best way I would describe them. If someone had to
I
describe
love it.
the culture of BCG, nice and smart.
And did you go to Boston and work for them there, or were you in the
No, I worked
Philadelphia
in
area?
actually
New
was
York?
one of the early employees at the New Jersey
New
office,
Jersey. Okay. Cool.
which is now I think their fifth biggest office
Yeah.
like in the US or something like that. The place has exploded. But we kind of were a satellite office in New York, so I worked a
Right.
lot with the New York and New Jersey folks. So.
Now, did you have people responsibility there, or did that
Did
come later?
not did
Yeah.
not have
Love
people
it.
responsibility. And much like most consulting firms, it's case by case
Case
basis,
by
right?
case.
So
Yeah.
the
Working through
teams
those clients.
change, and that
Yeah.
was one of the things that I found difficult, right? Obviously, I'm a team guy, played a lot
Right.
of sports. If I find a team that I like, I don't want to change it. But the general nature of consulting is your team is going to change every 6 months, whether you like it or not. Obviously, the more senior you get, the more say you have. But me, I use that word impatient. Me being impatient, I wasn't willing to wait 4 years, 5 years, whatever it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
till I could pick my own team. So
What was the first job when you started managing people, Rich?
The next job I had after that, which
Yeah.
was working as the COO of a small concert promotion company
Ah, cool.
called RPM.
Yeah.
Uh,
Were they a client of BCG or what?
no,
What'd
they
you
were
do?
not. So
Yeah.
this is a very close friend of mine who started off, in the nightclub business, worked his way up, and developed a very kind of profitable and large concert promotion company. And he was looking for ways to expand and professionalize the business. Obviously, there's a certain culture, obviously, working, in nightlife and concert
Sure.
working
Oh
at
yeah.
BCG. So he wanted to add a little bit of, more professional kind of
Professionalism.
approach to
Right.
business. And, he was a close friend of mine. He was also looking to potentially look at potential acquirers within the next 12 months. So I said, hey, like, let's do this and see
Yeah.
if we can get the business, growing and, see if we can get you another shot at exiting the business. So
What
that's
were
what I took
some
that
of
job.
Yeah, what were some of the challenges you had in
Oh,
taking over leadership?
yeah. So one is being, I guess I don't know if nerd's the right word, but being an outsider in a very, very close knit community,
Right.
people who work in nightlife and concerts and music. Um, it's obviously a very different group than
Very
playing
different.
football
Yeah.
or working at
Consulting. Yeah.
BCG and consulting
Right.
for some big bank. So having to, get credibility was
Mm.
probably the biggest thing for me is how could I deliver credibility and get respect from them, not just because of like my relationship with the boss, quote unquote, but how can I develop, like, how can I show my worth and prove my worth to people? That was the thing I was primarily concerned with is gaining their respect, because as we all know, like like a manager that you respect, a manager that delivers results, a manager that shows that he cares about you or she, um, tend to get the best performance out of their people.
Sure.
So that was
How'd
really
you
my most important thing.
were you how'd you do it and were you successful in doing so?
So I would say we were successful in like our financial like goals and outcomes.
Right.
I can't remember the output. I mean, we grew the business probably 30-40%. Um, we introduced a lot of new processes that gained efficiencies. He actually did get some people to come back to the table and make some offers. I mean, ultimately, I left before that came to a conclusion because the other
Right.
thing I figured out in that job is working with friends can be very, very hard. Um,
Right. Right.
so we decided, after it was a little after a year, about a year since I'd been there, that like, hey, I think it's time. This has run its course. The mission accomplished in terms of professionalizing the business, showing them new ways to make money. I felt like I did that. Or we felt like we did that. So I would say overall mission accomplished.
Right.
But it just the other thing that I figured out in that job is like it's not worth putting friendships
Yeah. That's hard.
after business. So that was the priority for me, and decided to to look for other opportunities, and got lucky with Medallia, which would be
Yeah,
the next
Medallia. So
part of
tell
my
us
story.
about that. You spent about 3 years there. What was their business promise?
So I think for me, again, loved like working in the concert business. One things I found out about myself that I confirmed: love small business.
Hmm.
So loved being in that fast-paced environment, making
Yeah.
decisions, going fast, and I really love technology.
Mm.
So I loved like the tech side of the business. I worked with the ticketing vendors. I worked with the scanners and security and things like that. So really love tech. And one of the contacts I had made at Penn during my recruiting, he had become the head of HR basically at Medallia,
Ah,
which is a customer experience company, venture
right.
backed by Sequoia, way back when. They've managed to IPO and then go back
Go
private,
private.
since I've left.
Right.
But very successful company. I think they had just received like a Series C or D round, and I got a phone call, and they were looking for like professional people to be in the organization to help with
Yeah.
account management and things like that. Jumped at the opportunity. I think it was employee like 350 over there. Got to
And
put
you made a move, right? Did you move to the
I
West Coast
did,
for a
yeah.
bit?
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
moved to Palo Alto for
Yeah.
a year. I think
Right.
that was like one of the big points was that they made it super accommodating for me to kind of live bi-coastally. So
Right.
pretty much left the wife and kid, in New Jersey. By that time, I had a daughter. Um, we realized it was a big opportunity, was willing to make the sacrifice to kind of go back and forth. So, I would probably go back and forth every other weekend for about a year between New York and San Francisco. Um, that was hard, but it was well worth it. After a year at Medallia in Palo Alto, helped open up their New York office here, um, in New York City in Midtown. So was able to come back home, but really, really loved, being part of that environment. I
Yeah.
think the revenue went from 20 million to 200 million.
Awesome.
Really one of those rare unicorns that actually fulfilled a lot of the promise. So just really love that opportunity. Learned a ton about tech and how to run a technology business. Made a lot of good connections, and then yeah, Alpine came calling with the chance to become a CEO at,
Yeah.
gosh, what was it 30? Hell, I don't know what, 36. I was 36 or
Yeah. Yeah.
37. Chance to become
Right.
a CEO, and that was really something I couldn't turn down. So again,
How'd you get on their radar screen? Did you know?
they had bought a small tech business in New Jersey, and they were looking to give an opportunity to someone as a first time CEO,
Wow.
but someone who had like traditional SaaS experience in the New York area. And I got recruited directly by, one of the partners there now to run the business. Um, so got recruited directly into a company called CSF,
Yeah.
which was the Alpine Software Group, which is kind of the investment um, kind of thesis or strategy that Alpine is undertaking in the SaaS world. It was their very first company. So
Wow. Yes.
got to be the first CEO at in the first company for Alpine Software Group, um, which
At the ripe age of 33.
yeah, at the right
Yeah.
yeah the ripe age of like 36 or whatever it was.
And
Uh,
then did that company sell
yes,
Switch or?
that company
Yeah.
we exited successfully 2.5
Yeah.
years in, closed that transaction to a strategic
Congratulations.
investor
All right.
in August of 2019. I then we both, ASG and me, decided to run it back for a second time with a company called ImageQuix,
All right.
which is in the photography e-commerce space. Started there in January of 17. We weathered the COVID storm, came out of it gangbusters. Really developed a really awesome business there, and we just exited that business September.
Few months ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
September
Yeah.
of this year,
Yeah.
and now I'm going for third bite at the apple, if you will,
Trifecta.
at Workspace. So
Yeah.
just really love the people at Alpine. It's a great strategy. We've had a couple of really good outcomes. I really love you know that part of running a business is just the growth aspect of it,
Right.
the exit aspect of it. Just love the action, I guess is the best way to put it, because I tend to do these things kind of fast. I
Tell
know.
us about Workspace. What's the promise there?
So I think for Workspace, it's commercial real estate software,
Yeah.
obviously a very kind of tried and true industry along many fronts. But our big kind of impetus is on the digital payment side of things.
Hmm.
And we've heard this a lot, obviously, during the pandemic, but this is really one of the few industries that still relies a lot on paper checks
Yeah.
to
That's
do
right.
a lot of their
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And with the
Very old school.
advancements, yeah, so digital transformation. So I'm always looking for
Right.
opportunities where there's digital transformation. It's hard because the way I always describe it is you're selling two things, right? You're selling the idea of doing something digitally that you were doing something that was being done in an analog fashion. And
Right.
then the second thing you're doing is trying to convince people that your product is the right one to use.
Right. Right.
But usually, if you can pull it off, the fruits of the labor are pretty significant. So that's what we're really doing here at Workspace, right? Really have a nice base in kind of our core software and property management, but really trying to lean in on the digital transformation on the payment side of the business.
How big's the team today?
Team is relatively small.
Yeah.
We're about 20 folks right now.
Right.
But the great thing about software, this is what I tell people all the time, it's like I could have 20 people and my company
Yeah.
could be
You have a
five
$200
million
million
bucks or
company.
it could
Yeah.
be 50 million. Right? It's a great thing about
Yeah.
software is that you
Right.
don't need a lot of people to touch, a big portion of the universe, which is
Very efficient. Yeah. But the company's based out in California, is that right? So are
correct.
you
Yeah.
commuting back and
Yep.
forth? How's that working
Companies
out?
in Irvine,
Yeah.
California. So yeah, I go back and forth. Team's been fully remote since the pandemic.
Right.
So they're not really even hybrid. There's a couple people that go into the office, but most folks are remote. So it's allowing me to run the business from Raleigh. And I go out there probably, half a dozen times a year.
Yeah. Well, now as your third CEO, opportunity, how would you say your leadership style has evolved over that, these last three projects?
So I mentioned that word impatience when I was at
Mm.
BCG. I think patience is now
Up front.
mine
Yeah.
when it comes to handling situations. And I think I've taken a lot of the emotion out of um, kind of the way I've, progressed and handled, people, quite frankly.
Yeah.
When you're early on in your career, I think like for me personally, it was a lot of like, well, everything's my responsibility. So if you don't do it my way, then, I'm going to be,
Get out of the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to be put at risk. So now I'm
Right.
much more an enabler, much more of a coacher. I
Mm.
think like I trust people a lot more. Um, and like I give advice to now people who are starting in their careers. It's like there's a reason, we pay people. There's a reason, they have the job that they have, and we got to trust them to do their job.
Yeah.
I went from trying to manage the day to day closely to really focusing on being an enabler and hiring really well.
Mm.
So I'm a firm believer now. If you hire great people, it makes your job as a leader so much easier, and you can provide so much more fulfillment to them and yourself in your own career if you're able to hire well and build great teams. So that's really what I focus on.
What do you look for when you're making bets on those people you invest in and hire at Workspace?
So that's a great question. I think it depends on what we're looking for.
Yeah.
I think I'm looking for someone to um, not always have all the answers, but to understand how to navigate all types of situations.
Mm.
Because inevitably, you're not going to know something, or you're going to be asked, a question that you don't know, or we might not like the answer as hirers, but you got to be able to handle like
Uncertainty.
diversity and change. Yeah,
Right.
you gotta be able to handle like being knocked off your game. And I think
Yeah.
people who are able to do that in a calm manner and are well prepared, that's the other thing. Like there's no excuse to not be prepared.
Right.
And I think that's what we look for a lot in people are like, are they coming prepared? Can they listen? I think in today's world, people come with their narratives and they just want to like stay focused on what they've rehearsed and
Mm.
they don't listen you
Yeah.
know, like if I ask you a direct question, I'm expecting a direct answer. And there's
Right.
so many people today that can't do that.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you're able to prepare and answer questions directly and listen, you're going to be in great shape.
Right. Right. What do you do you look for people with previous startup experience? Is that important? Now that you've done three of these.
No, I got to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I prefer people who are more of a blank slate who show
Yeah.
lots of potential
Right.
because you can do two things there. So one is I think it gives them a higher ceiling in terms of potential, and you're also able to influence, you know, their development. And that's something that's
Right.
super important to me as someone who like longs to be a high school football coach.
Yeah.
I prefer people who, are still trying to figure it out in terms
Mm.
of like career direction, experience, things like that. Obviously for certain like senior roles, like you make it like that's not always going to work. But if I had to pick someone with 5 years experience that, was kind of set in their ways, but kind of did the job well versus someone who has a year experience who I has great potential. I'm picking the riskier one every time.
Yeah.
You
Makes good
know?
sense.
So and that's my own career, right? I see
Right.
it's
Sure.
people who you tend to hire and gravitate to tend to be a mirror of your own self
Yeah.
at certain points.
Yeah.
So, that's worked for me, so I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah. What about company culture? CEOs talk about the importance of that. And you've got a remote workforce. We all learned how to work so much more remotely during the pandemic. Um, how do you build that culture? How do you communicate that? What are the things that you do that let everybody know, hey, this is what we do around here and this is why it's important?
So this is my first company fully remote.
Mm,
Every other company I've been in has been in office. I call it an
right.
in-office culture.
Right.
So the challenges are very, very different.
Yeah.
For me, I like, I'm a firm believer in like team chemistry. Like define
Mm,
that how you will, but I think people who are comfortable with each other, know each other, um, spend time together, they're more effective working together.
Yeah.
I think if your job requires a lot of interaction with other people, fostering that type of chemistry is super important. And
Right.
also, I understand being in a software company, you have a lot of individual contributors where that's not so much of a big deal. So I think for me, the thing I try to stress with folks is kind of regular cadence of interaction.
Mm.
What I always try to avoid is like the rolling out of bed, deciding to do X or Y today instead of doing kind of the same
Right.
thing every day. So
Yeah.
I ask my team for a lot of predictability, a lot of communication, um, and then a regular cadence of getting together in person, whether that's once a quarter or every other month. And then I try to be as visible as possible too,
Yeah.
whether that's hosting town halls or,
Right.
I'm a big guy on, I got this gift one year of, it was like a calendar with like a fun fact every day, and I started posting it in Slack. So I do an on this day fact now every day for the past 4 years where, we just throw out a fun fact of the day. So I
Nice.
try to do as many things as I try to stay visible, encourage kind of regular cadence of communication, and then some kind of cadence of like interpersonal like interaction,
Yeah.
basically.
Awesome.
So
Do you have a
a lot of
favorite interview question that you like to ask? If so, would you share it with us?
that. Yeah. I actually have a couple. So one is, what are you looking for in your next role?
Hmm.
Because I think people who are clear about what they want, it helps us determine the fit a lot
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And doing that unprompted. So
Right.
just tell me what you want, and then I
Yeah.
ask the reverse. Tell me what you don't want. Like, what are you
Right.
not looking for?
Yeah.
Because so many times you're able to tease out things that really get you excited about a candidate or things that'll raise a red flag.
Yeah.
Because it's important. The way kind of we frame it is, it's important to us when we hire you that we understand what's important to you, so we can put you in a position that you're going to enjoy. And then
Right.
conversely, we don't want to put you in a position where you're not going to enjoy
Yeah.
it.
Leverage their
Because,
strengths, not their
yeah,
weaknesses. Yeah.
unhappy
Yeah.
employees are less productive employees, and they tend to leave. you
Right.
know,
Pretty
um,
straightforward.
and that doesn't matter on like if they're a high performer or not. Like, high
Right.
performers need to be stimulated just as much as kind of mediocre performers.
Yeah.
So if you
So
want to
true.
get the most out of a person, they got to be in a position where they're happy, and they're doing things that they like to do.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, Rich, we're just about out of time, but we always ask one last question of our CEO guests, and that's what kind of career and life advice would you give someone who maybe has their own eyes set in the corner office someday?
That's one piece of advice.
It can be a couple.
um, don't go too fast.
Hmm.
And in every situation is a learning opportunity. So after every experience or situation or job, whatever have you, there's always something to be learned, whether good or bad, and put that away in your list of things that
Yeah.
help define what is important to you and what is not important to you. Because then, if you keep doing that, you'll eventually, find your happy spot, whether it be career, life, or whatever. So always learn from everything that you do.
Yeah. Great stuff. Rich Scanlon, CEO of Workspace, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thanks, Brant. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.